Hi, hello everybody. My name is Domenico Fermonte and I'm a researcher and lecturer at the Faculty of Political Sciences at the University of Roma 3. And today I'm here with my colleague, Teresa Numerico, and she's Assistant Professor of Philosophy of Science at the Department of Philosophy, Communication and Performing Arts here in the same University of Rome 3. And we are both part of a research team, and you can see the link at the end of the first slide. This new research group, which is called New Humanities, it's an interdisciplinary group of researchers from all different disciplines and departments in University of Roma 3. So we are also representing our research group in this wonderful conference. And by the way, we are very proud to be part of this exciting group of people coming from all over the world, and yes, we would like both to thank Jeffrey Rockwell from Alberta for this invitation, and of course everyone else from the Alberta team. And so we are today joining forces, from different disciplines: political sciences, sociology of communication, philosophy of science, and to discuss some of the relevant issues, of course, related to privacy and surveillance in the digital age, which is the topic of this Around the World conference. So Teresa will be the main speaker. I'm a guest, but I will coordinate the session. And so we designed these more as a dialogue rather than an individual lecture. And so I think that you can maybe start saying something on this very interesting title. Can you say more about? Are you ready to start?
Thank you, Domenico, and thank you everybody for organizing this conference. The aim of this dialogue is to discuss the issue of surveillance, not only from the moral and political perspective, which is obviously we are obviously against all this stuff about surveillance, that everybody is under surveillance, etc. But we want to discuss it from another perspective, which is the legitimacy, epistemologically speaking, of the idea of surveillance techniques. And to do so, I will discuss about three main arguments. First of all, the desire of people to be observed. Secondly, the technology and an archaeological perspective on technology of communication, and how this archaeological perspective can empower people who want to control, giving them the services and the tools to do so. But thirdly, I want to discuss it from the perspective of the possibility of discussing, of understanding the object under observation. And I think that this is the most important issue to discuss here, because it's crucial to show that the king is naked. And if they want, they pretend they are observing, and they can detect everything from this observance. But in fact, if we look at in a detailed more detailedly, we can more in detail, we can understand that this is not the case. And what is happening is just that we are in the process, people who are observing are in the process of creating their object of observation, and by this creation they will legitimate themselves. But this is not something that is really related to what's going on in reality. I'm sort of philosopher, and I don't want to abuse about this term. It is clear that reality is something that is created socially, but this social creation must be agreed by every member of the group, while in this case, the creation of the object is demanded only to the people who are in charge of the technologies of observance. And this is something that needs to be discussed not only from the political and the moral point of view, but also from an epistemological and an ontological perspective. And this is what we are trying to do in this discussion. So these are the three main areas that I want to touch. Obviously, I don't want to be exhaustive on these three items, to these three issues, but I think that they are really crucial. The first, as I was saying, is why it is so vital to be watched, why people desire to be observed. Secondly, I will discuss about the genealogy of control, and I will discuss about cybernetics and user-friendliness as tools of control and surveillance. And thirdly, I will discuss about the connection between the rhetoric about big data and the creation of the object under observation, which is exactly the main issue of surveillance. I will start by discussing about an author which is really interesting according to me. He wrote this short novel in 1986, which was published in English in 1988. It is called The Assignment, and the author is Frederick Durmat. In this short novel, he was discussing about different issues about, in fact, the subtitle is on the observing of the observer of the observers. I don't want to tell the story because it's a very complex story, but I suggest you to read it. I will concentrate on chapter 6, which is a chapter in which the logician discuss about this issue of being under observation. And I think that there are three issues here that are very well described by the author. As often happens, literature can understand better than other sciences what's going on. The first issue is that we can consider that now the contemporary man, might be considered the man under observation, because it's never alone. Everybody, there is someone who is looking at him.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
This novel was written during the Cold War.
Well, during the 80s, so yes, the end of Cold War, let's say. Of course, there is a discussion on the this idea of building weapons in order to observe the enemy while building the weapons.
This was written during the obsession of spying and controlling people during Cold War. But so something we are also
and there
experiencing today.
It's also about the labyrinth and the idea of this, all these reflections, all these mirrors in which you are reflected and you are watched by other people, and at the end of the day you don't understand who you are and who is the enemy and who is the friend. So this is the plot. But the plot is very complicated, though the novel is very short, so I advise everybody to read it.
We suggest everybody to read this novel.
Yes, suggest everybody to read this novel. So the second issue that is raised in this chapter is the idea that the activity of observing is a sort of objectification. So the wife and the husband are observing each other, and by doing this, they are. The wife is hating the husband, and the husband is psychoanalyst. Psychoanalyst.
I think so.
And the idea here is that by observing each other, they have forgotten about themselves as a couple, about the subject, them as a two subject, but they are object of observation. And this obviously is something that made them to split up. And thirdly, the third issue that is raised is the fact that not being observed is something really critical for people, because not being watched would make people feel not worth noticing. Not being worth noticing would make him feel disrespected. Being disrespected would make him feel insignificant. Being insignificant would make him feel meaningless. And so people just and become depressed. So people need a principle, someone which is outside of the scene who is watching, in order to feel that they are worth being observed. And I think that this is another crucial issue here, and this is what I want to discuss in more details. The fact that people, I want to start from this, the fact that people need to be watched, to be observed by others or by a superior principle.
So this is for you, and according to what you're saying, there is a desire to be watched and to be observed.
Yes.
It's like in everyone, in all of us.
Because it's a desire to be recognized.
So
it's a desire of recognition. It's a desire of recognition and of being someone who is worth to be noticed. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that is crucial of the human being as it is, and it's not related specifically to the communication technologies. But what I'm suggesting here is that there is something that is in communication technologies that offer a possibility, a new empowering possibility to do it in a more universal way than before. Okay, maybe I want to skip this because I think that it's late. So there are different reasons why people want to be observed. This is here we have two perspectives. One is this by Illutz, which is cited in the book by Loving, Rebels Without Networks Without a Cause. Sorry, and the idea is that you need to be observed in order to be considered competitive enough. So it is impossible to distinguish between private and public life of people, and people need to self-market themselves in order to be considered relevant, to get a job, let's say, for example. But at the same time, you need to be because they cannot separate their private and their public life. This is something that is very intrusive even in private life. This desire to be observed, to be considered as someone who is really clever, really worth of
being appreciated.
Yes, being appreciated or something like that. Then there is this perspective which is the Bauman perspective, and this idea that the erosion of anonymity is something that is more related to this idea that the technologies are very good and are very important, are very interesting. So to be part of this social networking environment, people need to be enthusiastic about them. So it's not only a matter of technology, but it's a matter of let's say an adhesive perspective on this technology. No? You need to be enthusiastic, this enthusiastic devotion and the feeling applause with respect to these technologies. And this transformation of the old panopticon as a nightmare in the dream of being under being noticed. So the idea that I'm never on my own is transformed, according to Bauman, in this good hypothesis of never never again being alone. So the fact that you can be together with the other people all the time, not being abandoned. So this is the probably it's a way of understanding the Dürrenmatt hypothesis, that you need to be observed not to feel alone, not to feel abandoned, ignored, or neglected.
So it's like we have generated our panopticon.
Yes.
Our own.
Yes, and it's
panopticon.
because according to Bauman, we are not in the panopticon age, but in the post-panopticon. It's a synopticon in which everybody is looking at everybody else, and by this system of recognition, you feel that you are somebody that is worth to be observed. Now, this is something that as I was saying, is not related to the very to the start of the technologies of communication, but it's something that is related to the how people feel about themselves. How to avoid loneliness, how to avoid depression, etc. Now I want to discuss about the genealogy of control as a special case of communication. So these technologies of communication as tools to control other people, what other people are doing. And this is something that has to do with cybernetics, according to me. I don't want to discuss it in very in deep details. I've discussed about it in other occasions, but I want to underline the fact that these technologies of communication started as controlling technologies and are considered as controlling technologies by the pioneers, though Wiener was more critical about this perspective on technologies and Licklider was more enthusiastic, but this is not very relevant at this point. What is relevant is just that these technologies of communication empower the observing perspective on communication. So according to Wiener, communication control is just a special case of communication. Is it the case of communication in which you want to understand, to be sure that the order is performed by the people who need to perform the order. So you want a feedback. So in communication, according to Wiener, there is something that still remains, let's say,
Vague? No.
Vague, yes, something that is unknown. So you communicate with somebody else, but the other people is not. You're not completely in control of your message because the other people can interpret it, and you never know what he understood about what you're saying, even if he is replying to you. In control, no. In control, it's a special case of communication in which you want to be sure that if you ask somebody to open the door, he will open the door. And only after he opened the door, you can be sure that the control was working. So, but this idea that control is just a special case of communication can be understood as, in terms of communication, as something that can be controlled using the right devices. So the metaphors that cybernetics include in the discourse about these communication technologies, and cybernetics was one of the important tools of the communication technologies, is this idea of the fact that a living organism and machines can be associated in terms of behavior oriented to a purpose. This idea that you can understand the behavior in terms of input and output. Input and output can be described as transmission of messages. So even if you are not explicitly talking with somebody else, you are sending him or her a message. And so you can understand transmission of messages as a negative feedback, so that you can, let's say, you have to rearrange your behavior in considering the signals that you receive. And this is something that is sort of automatic or mechanical in some way. So if you look at the human beings and animals and machines in this perspective, you don't see difference, any relevant difference. You can imagine that you can have communication between human beings and machines without any relevant loss of the concept of communication. So communication can happen between human beings and machines as it can happen between human beings. And this was the idea of Wiener. He was very critical of the possibilities that this technology brought in society, but he was convinced that this was the case and wanted to solve the problem from a, let's say, ethical or social perspective. But in terms of scientifically, he was convinced that there was no difference between sending a message to another person or sending a message to a machine or receiving a message from a machine.
So you are saying that cybernetics offered a model.
Yes, cybernetics offered a model so that you can communicate with the machine. But if you need to communicate with the machine, obviously you need to communicate so that the machine can be in control of what you are saying, because a machine needs to understand what you are saying, and in order for the machine to understand what you are saying, you have to follow a very precise set of rules. Let's put it this way. And according to the cybernetics, there is no loss of meaning if you consider that communication can happen in this way. So if we can reduce communication to communication between a human being, an operator, and the machine, then communication is something different from a dialogue between two people. It's something that is more similar to a control system than to a real communication system. And this is the first step. And the second step was provided by Licklider. Licklider is not very well known as Wiener, but is one of the crucial figures of the beginning of the communication technology, and is considered the father, at least from an ideological perspective, of the network. His perspective was that there had to be connection between a machine and its operator, and this connection must be something like a symbiosis. So something in which you cannot have the operator to to work alone, and you cannot have the machine to work alone. So this symbiosis is something that was crucially at the core idea of the human man-machine interaction, or how it's called now, human-machine interaction. And he was the one, because he was for 2 years between 62 and 64, he was the head of this office that provided funding with people to groups of scientists who were proposing technologies for communication technologies. He was in the position of orienting the future. He was in the position of creating the future. The best way to foresee the future is to create it, and that's what Slicklider did. He also worked in these libraries. On the library issue, because he was asked for a research on the future of libraries, and he wrote this book in 1965 out of this research, which is called Libraries of the Future, in which he sort of underlined that in the future it is better to control the future of knowledge, the fund of knowledge, by a processing of information and by handling all the detail directly themselves. So it was crucial, according to him, that the machine could do it better, like could handle the fund of knowledge better than human beings. And this was a sort of an ideology, a perspective, but because it was in such a important position, he could, let's say, he was in the position to render all this true. These procognitive systems should be considered as a sort of user-friendly machine that could help the humans. And all this idea is that started with this the aveniristic positioning that he was suggesting, that in the future the human memory and the library and the laboratory should be just one big repository of information from which to obtain all that you need to make new discoveries, etc.
Knowledge.
Knowledge, yes. To create, to produce knowledge. But this idea that you cannot produce knowledge without the aid of the machine, and that even your memory should be connected with the archive of a library, means that there is no separation. You cannot separate anymore the human being from the machine. But because the machine is built, because the machine is the computer, it's nothing else. It's not a generic machine, it's the computer. So it's a digital machine controlled by a certain type of software, which works according to certain rules. This means that because you cannot produce knowledge without being connected to the machine, and you need to be connected to the machine in order to understand reality, this means that you become in control of the machine, because the machine needs to understand you. And so you have to follow the rules that allow the machine to understand you. And this is, I think that this is the archaeological perspective on the connection between communication and control, which is at the...
And surveillance.
And surveillance, yes. Control, in terms of surveillance. According to Wendy Chan...
So you are using surveillance and control as synonyms?
No, I'm not using them as synonyms. I'm just saying that control is a the tool by which surveillance can work.
Can be applied.
Yes, can be applied. Without control, you cannot have surveillance. I'm not saying that all control technologies are per se surveillance control technologies, but without the control technology, you cannot have the surveillance technologies that you are experiencing now.
So the idea is, what you are saying is that the control tools, or the control ideas make possible surveillance, but at the same time, it is like that surveillance and control. You cannot have surveillance without control, but you can have control without surveillance.
Yes, you can have control without surveillance. Because every time.
Sorry for our English, which is of course
not for my English. Your
influenced by the Mediterranean.
Surveillance is not necessary. Surveillance is necessarily connected with control technologies, while not all control technologies imply surveillance necessarily.
Okay.
But it's a sort of possibility conditions. Without control technologies, you don't have surveillance technologies as they are now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have to ask you to. We have another 10 minutes, and I would like also to ask a couple of questions. So if you can.
Yes, you can
summarize.
You can. Why don't you ask?
To make your conclusions of.
This is like the second part, and the third part is about this idea that surveillance. The question about how effective is surveillance in terms of big data analysis as it is now. No? Big data analysis as it is now. And this idea, this metaphor of complete transparency that is implied not only in surveillance, but also in a lot of other issues related with communication technologies, open data, and all this government trying to exhibit that they are open and that they can be completely transparent, etc. And this is connected with the idea that NSA can spy on everybody emailing or emails, understanding what's going on in the head of the people who are sending emails just because they can, let's say, access to their emails. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is the concept of transparency is transversal, and it's connected with both these issues that are deeply involved in communication technologies, and it's false in both of these cases. I will concentrate on the metaphor of transparency in surveillance, but of course you can apply the same method to understand that it is false also the transparency metaphor in other areas. So this is the Utah data center, which is considered the most important, the most relevant data center of NSA ever. It's not working very well at the moment because in October 2013 it experienced a very big electrical problem, severe electricity problems that caused damages to the machine. So it was about to be inaugurated, and they had to stop the inauguration because of these severe problems. Okay. And now there is this big secret on how much water they're using for refrigerating the computers. They say that this is let's say classified information, because out of this information people can understand if how many data, how many information they are managing, which is not the case. But in fact, what's happening is that they are paying for more water than they're using because there was this damages. So the center is not working at its full capabilities, but they are still paying for the water because they don't want to show that they're not using the water, because otherwise you can understand that there's something wrong going on. Anyway, this is just an example to show that it's not everything is not working as it's supposed.
So there's a mythology on
Yes,
how is
there is a
efficient
mythology about how efficient is the system, and even if it were working, then you have this information overload problem, as it's shown in the cartoon. Now you have all the email. Now you have to sort out the spam, all these emails that are not worth reading, controlling, etc., which is a very important job. Then I want to underline the fact that surveillance techniques are using text and data mining, which is exactly
the job of humanists.
Of humanists, because of course, in order to crunch data, but these data are not are text. So you have to find a way to make sense of this text, and the only technology that you can use is related to text management, which is connected with digital humanities, etc. So this is something that needs to be thrown as a question about responsibility of people who were involved in this.
I think that Jeffrey Rockwell was analyzing in this,
this issue in detail.
This issue in one of his papers about how the software that are commonly used in this analysis, in this software analysis, in this data analysis, are the same. Historically speaking, are the same used in philology or in linguistics since the first inception of humanities computing.
Okay, and then
so there is our responsibility also in this respect.
Yes, and this is something that is connects strictly big data and surveillance. This idea that even if you don't know why this is working very well, better than you expect, machines are better than you, as suggested by Licklider, in managing the fund of knowledge. Well, the fund of knowledge can be everything, not only books, but also people emailing to each other, people chats, people forum replies, etc., etc. Okay, Jenny Ulster, we don't have the time to discuss, but she is a very interesting artist, and she is asking for files from NSA and using these files as paintings in order to show what's secret and what's not secret in these files. And I think that she's a very interesting artist, and by her art she shows that their king is naked, let's say, but we don't have.
In what sense?
In the sense that, first of all, in the sense that she's using this act that allow normal people to ask for information to NSA, and NSA has to deliver, to deliver this information, but all this information is full of cancellation, and you can ask why, and they have to reply. You have to reply saying why. So by the
justifying
justifying, and by this justification, you can understand what's inside the. Okay. So this is, and even in the not classified information, like the torture, how they describe torture in some situation, in Guantanamo, etc. You can the vocabulary that it's used, it's very strange, put in a painting, and I think it's very it exhibits all the lack of meaning of all of this, no? So I think that she is very clever in her work. And then I want to, this is another example, the drones, unmanned aerial vehicle. This idea that you can, from a very long distance, to be very precise on the target, and this is something completely, first of all, completely false, and secondly, completely misleading about what a war should be. And you can understand from this that an observation device, as the drones were at the beginning, can become a very powerful weapon just because it is an observation device. So, I will skip on this, and in the future, but very near future, drones will be like this. This is an example of the nano drones, the nano drone technology. So this idea that the observer cannot be observed. So you are in the people who are the observers are always hidden. And this is the principle of the violence without the risk for the author of the violence.
So there's no, they are not taking the responsibility of. It's like to have responsibility aside, to.
Yes, this is like a
in
big,
a vacuum.
Yes, this is a big discussion because I don't want to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have to.
Yes,
finish.
We have to finish, and I want to give you the possibility to.
Maybe I will just one question.
Because in this drone technology, of course, there is this idea that machines can do it better than human beings. So now there are people who are pressing the button, even if from a long distance, but what they are suggesting is that machines can press the button better than human beings. So you can avoid, because this is the final, obviously, this is the final step, is that because you have to connect, because the communication between the human being and the machine must be governed by the machine, at the end of the day, the human being, the characteristic of the human being are not really valid for this communication. And at the end of the day, you can substitute very well a human being with an AI robotic system. But this is because you consider that the communication has to happen between the machine and the operator of the machine. So people, like human beings, can be considered inaccurate because let's say the standard is the machine.
Okay. Well, we have to finish. I have just one question, one final question. And I will just would like you to say something about this second point. If in this, nightmare context that we are living in, with this mass surveillance, and is it still possible for us? Maybe this is more prosaic, but it affects our everyday job. Is it possible to conduct any kind of intellectual research? I mean, we as researchers, what is if everything is controlled, if all the process of our research is under scrutiny, then what is the sense? What is the meaning of what we do?
First of all, what I'm trying to show, probably I didn't have the time to go too deeply in details about my thesis, is that even if the databases on our intentions is so deeply built, then it's false. It's wrong. It's full of noise because people are not consistent. People are not very standardized. It's not possible to standardize them very easily, and so and thirdly, you can put something. You can do something to avoid that the system is working well. For example, you can give about yourself false information. So increase the normal noise that that an observer can have. So I don't think that critical research and critical attitude is useless or it's completely forbidden by this surveillance environment mechanism. It's just that you have to be aware of the fact that it's not working as it's supposed to be. And it's like the rhetoric about, even the rhetoric of all the leakage on surveillance share the same vision that surveillance is something that is completely in power, completely in control, while I don't think that this is the case. This is something more related to the rhetoric.
So, okay, so maybe there is some space for optimism. Thank you
I
very
would
much.
say so.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and thanks to everybody who has been so passionate to listen to us today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.